The rules for why certain video game characters are loved or hated can get pretty arbitrary at times, which is why gaming is full of examples of misunderstood and underrated characters. Companions, villains, and playable characters alike can have truly captivating life stories or personality traits, but no one in the fandom seems to care because no one takes the time to understand them. The fans either focus all their attention on other characters or immediately disregard the unpopular ones because they don't catch on right off the bat. However, these characters do deserve people's attention. They could even possibly become your favorite characters if you just cast away the common misconceptions people have about them. For that reason, we're examining these misunderstood underdogs more closely and checking out that there's more than meets the eye. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 divisive video game characters you're completely wrong about. Number 10. WYLL, Baldur's Gate 3. When it comes to the cast of companions in Baldur's Gate 3, WYLL is probably not the first choice of favorite for most first-time players. On the surface, he seems like a boring one-dimensional hero. When you first meet him, he introduces himself as the famed Blade of Frontiers, the hero of the common folk that hunts down evildoers and acts like a total goody two-shoes in every situation. It isn't until you delve a little deeper into his story that you realize WYLL is not quite as perfect as he pretends to be. WYLL is actually a warlock who signed a pact with a powerful devil in order to gain powers that would turn him into the hero of his people. If this seems full of hypocrisy to you, it's because it is. And that's the first step to understanding why WYLL is actually a great character. He's the perfect deconstruction of the hero trope. He's a genuinely good man who's willing to sacrifice everything to save the day. But this sacrifice is also why he eventually becomes a monster himself, a puppet doing the devil's bidding. He's the perfect reminder that the road to hell is usually paved with good intentions. Number 9. Sam Drake, Uncharted 4. One of the greatest myths of Uncharted 4 is that Sam Drake is a definitive bad guy who only tugs at Nate's heartstrings to get what he wants. But while it is undeniable that Sam causes a lot of damage in his little brother's life, and that he's a greedy and impulsive person who manipulates Nate, his character, like many others in the Uncharted series, is far too complex to reduce him to the role of a simple villain. Truth is that Sam actively and consciously tempts Nate to abandon and potentially ruin his peaceful life with his wife. But in his mind, he does it with his brother's best interest in mind. Because he spent the majority of his life in prison and the only memories of Nate he has are those of when the two were young boys dreaming of a life of adventure, he believes Nate doesn't belong in a peaceful lifestyle scenario, but rather with him on the greatest treasure hunt of their lives. It's easy to disregard this aspect of Sam's humanity when he does so much harm and acts so irrationally, but it's important to remember to truly appreciate Uncharted 4's brilliant story. Number 8. Outsider, Dishonored. Given the dark themes of Dishonored and the fact that the supernatural powers present in the game are used for tearing people's limbs off rather than making them tea, most people tend to view the series' enigmatic deity, the Outsider, as a wicked devil. This idea is further supported by the fact that the in-game religion views the Outsider as a source of evil, and most of his worshippers you come across are witches who use human sacrifice to gain powers from him. Not cool. The truth of the matter, however, is that the Outsider is neither good nor evil. He's simply a curious observer who seeks out people of interest and offers them powers to see how they'll get through the events that piqued his curiosity in the first place. It's easy to interpret this as him toying with mortals, but the Outsider never forces you to take his gifts. Plus, he's perfectly content with your decisions, regardless of whether they lead to a tragedy or the best and most positive outcome. Without spoiling too much, the death of the Outsider further supports this aspect of his character, while also showing that he's more of a victim of his circumstances than an actual deity. Number 7. DoomGuy, Doom. DoomGuy is one of the most iconic characters in video game history, although his fame has very little to do with his personality. As a matter of fact, since Doom games don't delve deeply into his character, most people assume he doesn't have a personality at all, and he's just an angry psychopath that they can play as to shoot demons in the face without feeling any remorse. This, however, could not be further from the truth. Even the earliest iterations of Doom games made mention of DoomGuy's other side, and with the release of recent titles, the fuller picture of this bulking heap of brutality has only become more apparent. Despite what his preference for chainsawing demons in half might suggest, DoomGuy is actually a very compassionate and loving person. Doom Eternal and the 2016 release both show that DoomGuy cares a lot about humanity, and although his internalized trauma rarely lets him communicate with other humans, he would never hurt them or cause them any harm. Not to mention, his original crusade against hell started because demons killed his beloved pet bunny. The guy probably wouldn't even hurt a fly, so long as it didn't have horns and reeked of hell. Number 6. Sweet, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. The friends of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas' protagonist CJ are mostly crooks who wouldn't hesitate to stab him in the back, and yet somehow the character people hate most is CJ's most loyal companion, his brother and Grove Street leader, Sweet. Whenever fans talk about Sweet, they point out two things: his loyalty and his stubborn stupidity. Although we're told he always stands by his friends, if CJ so much as disagrees with him, Sweet is quick to cross him off as a traitor, making the loyal part of his personality fall a bit short. For this reason, people tend to hate Sweet, but the thing is, there's actually a pretty complex and compelling reason for why he's so abrasive, other than just his stubborn personality. You see, Sweet is secretly an idealist. In the game, he talks about how he founded the families to make his neighborhood a safer place and keep hard drugs off the streets. The only problem is that reality doesn't match his expectations, and naturally, this causes Sweet a lot of frustration. When he lashes out at CJ, it's not because he's a one-dimensional gangster. He's actually a complex visionary who's disappointed in the state of his beloved home. Number 5. Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong. It might come as a surprise to some, but the rivalry between Donkey Kong and Mario, or Jumpman if you want to be more accurate, is actually older than between Mario and Bowser. The Big Ape is technically the original villain of the Mario universe, which is pretty messed up considering he's not a villain in his own story. Though anyone who's played Donkey Kong would have a huge gripe against its titular antagonist for throwing copious amounts of barrels at them and always escaping with Pauline at the last second, in truth, Donkey Kong is actually the victim here. According to the official Nintendo descriptions of the game, the reason why Donkey Kong kidnaps Pauline and lashes out at Mario is because Mario kept him in a cage and abused him. What you see in the game is simply the moment when Donkey Kong manages to escape from his owner and takes revenge. The sequels to Donkey Kong further confirm this by showing Mario as the abusive owner of an entire circus of animals. So yeah, every time Donkey Kong knocks you out with a barrel, it's kind of well deserved. Number 4. Tom Nook. Animal Crossing: New Horizons. With a series as old and well established as Animal Crossing, it's inevitable that the community will have plenty of running jokes. One of them is the idea that Tom Nook, the series' most prominent businessman, is actually an evil, greedy corporate mogul who'll do anything in order to get his money. Though originally it started off as a joke, the myth of evil Tom Nook eventually became real. Despite not being the antagonist of the game, in 2002 he was named Nintendo's top villain by Nintendo Power magazine, and the in-game dialogue hinting at his dealings with Red, Animal Crossing's shady art dealer, further propagated his greedy persona. However, in reality, Tom is a more honest businessman than most. He always lets the player pay off their debt at their own pace, and when he's in charge of the island business in New Horizons, he shows that he cares deeply about the player's comfort and enjoyment. In fact, in Happy Home Designer, Tom even admits that he's aware people think he's, quote, scary, but he'd only keep up those appearances to make sure people would pay off their debts. And yet, you'd still never pay off his last loan. Who's the evil one now? Number 3. LOGHAIN. Dragon Age Origins. LOGHAIN, one of the primary antagonists of Dragon Age Origins, is a complex character that gets a bad rap for a mix of good and not so good reasons. Although he betrays his own king by purposefully abandoning his army at Ostagar and does some really shady things once he ascends to power, including but not limited to selling elves into slavery, he's actually more than the power-hungry, maniacal tyrant that most players make him out to be. LOGHAIN is actually a potential recruit for your party, but because he can only be enlisted in exchange for ruining the life of everyone's favorite Grey Warden, Alistair, it's easier to just tell yourself LOGHAIN's terrible and take him out with no remorse whatsoever. The thing is, when you recruit LOGHAIN, you get to see a different side of him, one of a devoted, if not fanatical, patriot, and a man who cares deeply about protecting his fellow Fereldans. You realize that his rise to power wasn't an attempt at becoming king, but rather a means to gather enough forces to save his nation. And yeah, maybe you could have done this without stabbing your character in the back, but nobody's perfect. Number 2. Preston Garvey. Fallout 4. It would be no over-exaggeration to say that Preston Garvey is one of the most hated characters in Fallout 4. His infamy is an effect of his boring personality, combined with the fact that Preston never shuts up about new settlements that need saving. The latter is why most people don't give Preston a chance to prove himself as a character, which is a shame because there's actually way more to him than meets the eye. As the last surviving member of the Minutemen, the self-organized civilian militia of the Commonwealth, Preston has a lot on his plate. He's forced to watch over the remaining civilians survivors of the Minutemen massacre and make something of his now defunct organization, all while struggling with the grief of watching his friends die. When you meet him, he's depressed and suicidal, but because he's also a man of duty, he tries to keep a straight face. So yeah, his tone may sound dull and he may not be as expressive as your other companions, but that's because deep inside, Preston's a broken man trying to find a new purpose in life. He also loves marking settlements on your map, but that's more of a game design issue. Number 1. Jack Marston, Red Dead Redemption. Of all the playable characters in the Red Dead Redemption series, Jack Marston gets the worst rap. Most people see him as an angsty replacement for his own father, John, without the fleshed out personality and sympathetic backstory that John and Arthur had. It's easy to see why most people would disregard Jack, given you don't spend as much time getting to know him as you do with the other two. However, that doesn't mean Jack Marston's character is lacking. In fact, he's possibly one of the most tragic characters in all of Red Dead Redemption. This is because Jack's arc is the culmination of all the mistakes and sins of his predecessors. Prior to his father's death, Jack was an innocent and intelligent child that both Arthur and John tried to protect from the ruthlessness of their criminal lifestyle and provide him with a better future. However, their criminal past isn't easy to erase, and when John ultimately brings the attention of Agent Edgar Ross on himself for taking revenge on Micah, he dooms his family and Jack's future, rendering everything he and Arthur sacrificed for Jack pointless. This is why when Jack takes revenge on Ross for killing his father, he doesn't actually get a good ending. He merely restarts the same cycle of violence his predecessors tried so desperately to stop. It's a tragic display of an innocent man turning into a bitter shadow of his former self that not many people recognize for what it is. That's the end of our list, but do let us know in that comment box if you can think of any other divisive video game characters that lots of people happen to be wrong about. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you're liking, come say hi to me on my X account where I am at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness. Thanks.